Hi, I'm Keith Johnston, your host for Forrester's podcast, What It Means, where we explore the latest market dynamics impacting executives and their customers. Today, we're joined by Vice President and Principal Analyst Sucharita Kadali and Vice President and Research Director Emily Collins to discuss holiday shopping. We'll look at how customers are feeling headed into the holiday season and how retailers should prepare. Welcome, Sucharita. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Keith.
So the holiday season, fast approaching, consumers plan to shop early, I think you said. They're feeling a little shaky about what they want to do with their holiday spend. And you're fresh off some research. So Sucharita, maybe just get us going and talk to us. How should retailers prepare to capitalize on this holiday season? And what are some of the findings that were particularly interesting coming out of this year's retail guide to the 2024 holiday season?
Yeah, this is going to be an odd holiday season for a lot of reasons. One is that there's an election happening. So, what that means is that all of the marketing levels are going to be likely out of control leading into November. And that's going to be very, very expensive for retailers to break through the noise. So, they are going to have to delay some of that marketing. And then on top of that, you also have a very late Thanksgiving. The latest that Thanksgiving can ever be is November 28th. And this year it's November 28th, which means it's going to be a very, very late breaking, those bursts of the doorbusters, and the Cyber Monday is going to fall closer to Christmas than it normally does. So it's going to be a very compressed holiday season. And then on top of that, and this is where a lot of the consumer research is so important, is that consumers are really uncertain about this holiday shopping season. There are more consumers that say that they are going to spend less this year than for the last several years. And that is not a good thing. That means that the numbers overall are going to be pretty soft. Every estimate that we have seen, whether it's the NRF or other organizations, has e-commerce in the high single digits. This is the first time ever in a holiday season we've had high single digit growth. Most of the time it's been double digit. And then stores will be very low single digit growth. And that too is pretty soft. So that's a lot of it doesn't speak necessarily to a phenomenal holiday season coming up in 2024.
So it's so interesting. I mean, you're talking about there's just so much turbulence in the economy, in the world, cultural, societal, all kinds of things going on. The jobs data, particularly in the U.S., is actually pretty good. Incomes are up, yet you're saying we're going to spend less. So maybe just a little bit more context, because there's kind of some tension there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Keith, this is something that probably for the last couple of years we've been calling the vibe session, which is that on the one hand, the economic indicators are very strong, all of the ones that you just cited, wages being at an all-time high, unemployment being relatively low. But there is this sense of the other shoe's going to drop. And I'm worried about the economy. Now, there are a whole slew of reasons for that. Some of it is the polarization in the economy. When you look at even just based on political party, whoever's in charge usually means that the other party thinks that the economy is doing terribly. So some of it is related to that, but you also can't discount the impact of inflation as well. There is still that lingering, it's almost PTSD for a lot of consumers, because prices are so much higher now than they were before the pandemic for basic essentials like grocery goods. You even see things like gas prices continuing to seesaw up and down, and the worry that kind of prices just may go up again is something that is incredibly disconcerting to shoppers. And I think that is part of the reason that they don't feel great about wanting to spend more.
It's so interesting you point out the whole idea of the finger pointing between the two parties. Why do you think seeing that kind of thing actually impacts a shopper?
It's a good question. What we see is, and you have to almost kind of go through, kind of the thinking, which is that you're told that things may be bad. So, therefore, in a survey, I'm going to say that things are bad, and I am not going to admit that I'm going to necessarily spend more. However, this is where the interesting thing is when we actually look at retail spend has been at record high levels. Every subsequent month, we have seen higher and higher levels of overall retail spend. Now, what I will say is that in the last, I would say, 8 to 12 months, we have seen spend growing at a slower rate than inflation. So we're seeing units consumed stabilize. So that's certainly something that's going to affect certain types of retailers more than others, particularly in a lot of big box stores where they may be selling discretionary items. But the truth is that people are in fact spending more. So some of it is just kind of the attitudes that you may espouse, and that's completely at odds with what you're actually doing.
Well, and one of the things that, one of our in our predictions reports for consumer this year, we talk about sort of these contradictions that we'll be seeing in 2025.
Yeah,
And,
I love that.
Humans are emotional beings. They're not necessarily rational. You can show them all the data, but there is, when it comes to shopping, especially around the holidays, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in holiday spending of, gifting and what, coming together or not, and loneliness and togetherness. And so I think that there's an emotional component to this that sort of defies some of the rational facts that we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I could agree. I actually, personally, I think we're going to have a good spending season, but I think it's going to be a little bit more pragmatic. And actually, I think you saw that in the data, Sucharita, that folks are going to be looking for deals, whether it's online or offline in the store, what have you. So maybe talk about, what the data said when it comes to that.
Yeah, we certainly know that people are planning on spending on key dates like Cyber Monday. And I do think that that is one of the biggest changes that we've seen over the last few years is that Thanksgiving and Black Friday were such huge parts of the holiday shopping season. And typically, Black Friday continues to be one of the biggest shopping days of the year, particularly for in store. But what we've also seen is this huge growth of Cyber Monday. 46% of consumers said that they plan to shop online on Cyber Monday. And it's not just Cyber Monday, it's that whole Cyber week. And then what we also see is that in the days following that Cyber week, you see that huge push toward people who plan to do in-person holiday shopping. So a third of people said that they expect to do more in-person holiday shopping this year. And I think they're going to have to because that's when the promotions are going to be in December, because again, it's a late Thanksgiving. And then that's where they know that they can get the items that they want. That's one of the issues that online always grapples with is can the shippers ship fast enough to ensure that you're going to get your gifts on time? So those are certainly big deals. And another part of the store story is curbside and in-store pickup. And those will continue to be a significant driver of shoppers to the overall omni-channel experience. Consumers definitely really gravitated to BOPIS during the pandemic. And that's been an investment that retailers still are reaping tremendous rewards from. We expect probably about a quarter of people to be using some sort of curbside or BOPIS transaction during the holiday season.
I'm so interested that we keep creating events to shop. I mean, Emily, you mentioned the emotions that are out there, but I don't know. I think shopping's pretty emotional. So, is that need to just be together socially and shop even online? I mean, is that a thing? Is that consumers are they craving that?
Event driven marketing has been for sales, I should say, has been a phenomenon that the entire you look at like 11/11 Singles Day, like that is I think kind of one of the biggest global illustrations of that. It's the biggest shopping day of the Chinese shopping year. It is so large that it ends up being I think like 10% of e-commerce in China, just like a single kind of one single shopping event. And that actually was one of the reasons that that we think that Amazon launched Prime Day. And Prime Day was so successful, they then had two, for the last several years. And that pulls forward a lot of shopping. And then you have a whole bunch of then people jumping on to the clown car. Like, we did an evaluation of like, I don't know, 70 retailers, and, kind of more than half of them had their version of Prime Day, like Walmart and Target and Best Buy
And even
Apple.
individual brands launch a sale that same time, usually at a pretty high rate of discount as well.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's the demand curve, right? People are going to purchase things on sale. And
Right.
so if you can and persuade everyone to be shopping online at the same time, you're going to sell more.
Also seeing a lot of those insider sales too. So it's sort of like it launches early to a certain group of people in the loyalty program. A lot of, things like there are certain deals that are only accessible to Target Insider Circle members or Amazon Prime members, Prime only deals. And then you even have retailers like Gap and Banana Republic who have historically just given a discount every single day, pulling back on those daily discounts and doing more events and launching them early to their loyalty program members, and they get first access to the full inventory, to especially those higher priced items that don't go on sale as frequently.
Fascinating. And I mean, brands doing their individual days, that's fantastic for their brand, because they create that kind of FOMO, like, I got to do it. I want to be part of this club. Loyalty programs are also very good to delivering promotions, for sure. And Sucharita, you talked about that a little bit earlier. Is there a particular trend in loyalty and in promotions that we should look forward to here in this holiday season?
So I think you're going to see a lot of brands launching their best discounts to their loyalty programs. Certainly, we know that there's going to be increased discount activity coming into the holiday and to the end of the year. But obviously, the more you discount, the more you erode your margin and,
Right.
Things like that. And so I think you are going to see a lot of organizations funnel the best discounts through their loyalty programs. I think you have to be really strategic, though, because a lot of times the people who are members of your loyalty program are already going to buy with you. And so thinking about, what is the cost opportunity there in terms of, what are you giving up to get those additional sales, based on your targets and things like that.
So you're saying they can leave money on the table?
Potentially. I mean, especially if that customer was already likely to shop with you at full price or at a lower discount, being really strategic about the types of discounts that you're offering through the loyalty program. Certainly seeing more of like those first access or sort of, insider only type things. It's a little bit more about access than it is about the discount.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll be back.
Last year, Forrester predicted that legal action over privacy protections would strike a major data provider. And in 2024, 2 large firms have already settled major privacy claims. That's the power of Forrester's predictions. Want to find out what's coming in 2025? Head to forrester.com/predictions today.
We have a couple of things going on here we're talking about that doesn't sound all that great for the retailers. One is you have these events and you just start throwing stuff in the cart because you think you need to buy it that day, which then could be a lot of returns, I would think. But then you also have promotion as a serious tactic this retail season, which obviously cuts into the margin. Sutri, what's it going to be like for the retailer? I mean, is this going to be one of those holiday seasons that could really wreak havoc, on the retailers and cost them money?
I wouldn't say it's going to be any worse than any previous year. I think that the holiday season, they are very well, most retailers are really well prepared for the huge onslaught of returns that happen after Christmas. And in fact, about 10% of sales for the entire holiday season actually happen after December 25th. One of the biggest shopping days of the holiday season is actually the Saturday after Christmas, for exactly that reason, people returning or redeeming gift cards or whatever that they, especially redeeming gift cards for any post-Christmas markdowns. So I think that it's not going to necessarily be worse. I would argue that some of the times for greater anxiety were over the last couple of years when there were supply chain issues. So long as retailers have the products in stores, they can usually figure out a way to make money off of kind of not only their best customers, but basically anybody coming into the door. And one nuance that kind of even just following up on Emily's point, which is that we started to see over the last couple of years, are some of the programs that companies like Patagonia and REI started to put forward for their holiday seasons, which was almost anti-discount. It was like, we don't want you to buy, kind of all the junk. We actually, in the case of REI, it was like, kind of, we don't want you to be wasting time in stores. We want you to go experience the great outdoors or go spend time with your family. And I think that those are very interesting, almost counterintuitive approaches to supporting their most loyal shoppers. And it's been an interesting approach. Kind of you see pockets of this um, sort of resonating through the economy and potentially even with other similar brands. But when we think of really creative approaches, that's an example of one.
Well, and let's not forget that if you're enrolled in a loyalty program, you're a known customer to the organization. So you can be more, strategic or incisive with the types of discounts that you're providing to those customers. You can lean into language around showing appreciation for them and gratitude for their business in the messaging. Like, it's not just all about, the discount and the offer. Our consumer data around loyalty programs shows that, especially among younger consumer generations, they feel that loyalty programs are influencing them to make more impulse purchases as well, and not just shopping for the things that they had already planned for or that are on their list. So I think that there's an opportunity using the marketing power of a loyalty program to really, meet your customers in the moment with something that's a little bit more relevant or personalized to them in that moment, that drives more of that emotional connection versus just the discount. I mean, I think next year we're sort of expecting that brand loyalty will decrease while usage of loyalty programs will increase because they have this association with discounts and wanting to save money, and consumers, this vibe economy of pulling back. I think that there's going to be a lot more usage of loyalty programs, but maybe not just to give out more and more and more discounts. It's not just about more is more.
What are some other tools that that the retailers can use, Suchari, to actually to balance out some of that spending instead of just having these flash events, where all the sales come in and I got to fulfill them,
Yeah, retailers can certainly be leveraging things like kind of more purpose-based marketing through their own social presence. It is as much of a time that people are seeking information and seeking insights on how to use things or what may be kind of one of the things that Emily's talked about is the kind of leveraging loyalty, kind of after you've purchased something, and to give insight and advice on maybe how to use things after you've purchased it, or what's the value of something, kind of once you own it. And leveraging social for that, leveraging owned channels like even email for that. Retail media is a huge part of the retail ecosystem at this point. And that is also a way that retailers can message in manners that are not just heavily promotional. It can be more about needs based, or it can be more about other types of messaging that can be more emotional or longer term. It's not just oh goodness, here's a sale that we're going to offer you. You'd mentioned, Keith, returns management, even messaging some of the simplicity, perhaps if you actually have a very simple returns process. Some of that around returns can also help to support conversion rates and can also make shoppers more loyal to brands.
So loyalty is a great way to keep customers on your platform with your brand. You got them as a captive audience versus Sucharita, you're talking about retail media. There's a little tension in retail media because you're losing a little bit of control around your brand. Um, let's talk more about that. Retail media has been on the rise for years now. There's big marketplaces out there for retail media. Is there any advice for our brands on how to leverage it? Should they, invest more in it?
From a brand standpoint, it's table stakes at this point. I think the bigger question for brands are which retail media networks are you going to lean into,
And which
and are you going
commerce media networks, right? So it goes beyond just retailers at this
retail,
point.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. It could be, kind of Uber or Marriott or, or whoever, like a credit card, right? At this
Mhm.
point. Yeah, absolutely. And for brands, it's exciting because it's a new form of marketing, right? I mean, it's no longer just the duopoly of Meta and Google. Now there's Amazon, there's Walmart, there's, kind of Chase or other players that you could potentially partner with and use some of that first party data to reach customers that you may not have been able to reach before with the kinds of messages that you want to reach them, particularly in Q4. So it's exciting for the brands. The challenge has been that the retail and the commerce media networks themselves don't always have great offerings that are as easily usable as, like, say, Google, which of course has spent
Mhm.
decades with this amazing self-service platform, and these guys are often still taking manual insertion orders. So it's going to be a little while. There's a little bit of work that these commerce media networks have cut out for them, but it's promising.
But again, this is another area where loyalty comes into play in terms of retailers using their first party data to sell the media, to provide insights for the brands who are buying within those media networks. So, again, this is a great time to shore up your sources of first party data and ensure that you're maybe growing the loyalty. I think we're going to see continued focus on growth of loyalty programs and capturing the data that's going to be useful to help improve the insights that are coming out of retail media, because I think measurement within and across all these networks is still a big challenge for brands who are buying in this space.
How do brands choose, or how do marketers choose which one of these retail media or commerce networks to actually use?
Well, they're not using just one. When in some of our CMO research, the average marketer is working with five or more retail media networks. So it's actually not just a single one, but usually the prioritization is going to be based on audience reach, ease of working with that particular retail media network. Kind of, is it the pricing, of course, of the kind of the offering, and the measurement and the full funnel capabilities that that particular retail media network has. If there's an offline component, if there's the ability to tie it back to store sales, these are all powerful things that can help, or other channel sales in the case of commerce. All of those are the factors that determine why one retail media network over another. The challenges for retail media networks is if they don't have enough reach, or they don't have enough inventory. Those, more often than not, are the reasons that a brand may hesitate.
Right, access to audiences too, right? So your existing audience, or you're trying to reach new audiences. So basically, what can the retailer tell you about who you can access within their network and reach?
So retail media has been trending for a few years now. Or is there any other emerging channels that marketers should be looked to use in this holiday season?
I mean, we keep hearing about things like podcasting. um, I was just at the Amazon Ads Unboxed event, and they had kind of they showcased their Wondery podcasts and had Dax Shepard and others speaking, and it had it had a huge burst during the pandemic. Then, as people went back to the offline world, it seemingly kind of flatlined. But now it seems to be back again to a level of potential growth. And it's a way to reach first party audiences, but also to be able to tell your story in a way that I think brands have in many ways, kind of lost through digital advertising, because so much is so static. Um, so there's that. But even going back to retail media, I mean, one of the areas within retail media we're excited about is the in-store retail media piece. So much of retail media has been online, but the physical, kind of display ad screens, leveraging audio in a physical environment. Those are all potential places where you could have ad placements.
Two other areas that I think that are sort of retail media adjacent or not related to retail media really at all are social commerce and creator. So social commerce, TikTok Shop kind of changed the game on social commerce, showing that there can be, for better or for worse, whatever you think about TikTok Shop, it's changed, sort of created more of a good user experience within TikTok. I know there was a lot of buzz around social commerce a few years ago, and ultimately there just wasn't the trust and usage from, especially in the US, from a consumer perspective. But now I think we're seeing that resurge, especially when you think about reaching younger audiences. And then creator marketing, influencer marketing. The opportunity there is not just about sort of driving purchases, but also leveraging creators to help co-create and share your brand message. So there's a brand component to that as well, not just about sort of, driving the next purchase and, click my link in affiliate and things like that. There's more opportunity there.
Yeah, and one thing, just to even add, Emily, some nuance, particularly around TikTok Shop. One of the things that I do think TikTok has done better than previous social media, social commerce efforts is that they have focused on search, which I think is very interesting. That was something that Facebook years ago sort of deliberately set aside. And, kind of now you can actually search for products on TikTok and see decent content that is shopping related that leads you to, ideas of products you may want to buy if you're searching for something like a duffel bag. So I think that could be a potential catalyst that finally unlocks social commerce in a way that none of the previous social commerce players have successfully done. And it'll be interesting to see if that ultimately gives Google a run for its money.
So this is a fun time of year to talk about all this. And even though Christmas already started at most retailers, there has to be some advice that we can offer with this data freshly published in the retail report. So if you were going to give us some advice, how should retailers be thinking about their strategies here in 2024 and, of course, their loyalty programs?
I would say that some of the most important things, in a highly promotional season is that you're going to be having some budget around what your promotional, kind of opportunity is. And if you have to think through and you can't offer like blanket site-wide discounts every day from now until December 25th, to leverage that loyalty program and any first party data to be more selective about who gets what offers, to be much, much more selective on which products and which subcategories that you may be discounting, in order to have that balance of what shoppers want from a pricing standpoint, but also how do you meet your margin hurdles? Because that's, I think, the biggest risk with this Christmas season is just giving away too much and then being left with a bunch of dud products that no one wants to buy in the days leading up to Christmas.
So constantly calibrating. And of course, we have technology for that now, right? So that's actually great advice because it is not too late to do that.
And then I would just to add to that, it's like we know discounts are going to be top of mind for both brands and consumers and retailers as consumers as we move through this season. But to not forget the other things that consumers value around, enhanced service that you might already be offering, exclusivity, making them feel special. Consumers, especially those in your loyalty program, want to feel like they're getting something that's not available to someone else, especially when you think about the people who are willing to raise their hand give you their information. They're probably already a strong customer for you from a customer lifetime value perspective. So just not forgetting to provide that messaging around showing appreciation for their business, and to kind of make them reinforce those feelings of exclusivity, access, and appreciation.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Sucharita. Thank you, Emily. We look forward to everyone getting out there and spending those dollars.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Forrester's What It Means podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. To continue the conversation, follow Forrester on LinkedIn or drop us a note at podcast@forrester.com. Thanks for listening.